One of the best pieces of advice that I can give to you is to not forget that bread. Now, you may be thinking one or two things. One, is he talking about money? And two, is this dude crazy? What does that even mean? But don't click off this video. I promise you, I'm going to unpack this and it's gonna bless you for the rest of your life. I was gonna say bless you this year, but when I thought about it, I'm like, no, this foundation, understanding the key to this phrase, what this is talking about, is gonna bless the rest of your life and your walk with God. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we're gonna be coming from a special chapter in the Bible called Mark chapter 6. Now, the reason why I call this special is because some very notable things happen. And the one thing where I'm going to focus on today is the miracle of the loaves. Remember this time when Jesus fed over 5,000 people with only 2 fish and 5 loaves. Now, this is an incredible account of itself just to remember and think about this amazing creative miracle that nobody has ever seen up until this point. And you may be thinking that the people who were there at this time must have been the ones who were so blessed by it, such as the disciples. You must have thought that if you seen this, that they would never forget what they saw, that this would be a life-shaping and a life-changing miracle from God that they witnessed. But that isn't the case. And see, this is where we're going to pick up immediately after that in Mark chapter 6, verses, phone locked, verses 45 through 52, which read, "Immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, he and him being Jesus, while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray. And when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, 'Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid.' And when he got into the boat with them, the wind ceased, and they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened." Now, crazy, right? Incredible. Not only did they just witness this incredible miracle of Jesus feeding 5,000 people with only 2 fish and 5 loaves, but immediately after that, they see Jesus walking on the water. And the Bible's commentary on this is so grand in verse 52 to say, for they did not understand, in verses 51 and 52, in that they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. These guys were utterly astounded. They could not believe that they were seeing Jesus walk on the water. And now you may be thinking, okay, these disciples must be crazy or wild, because how could they have already forgotten what Jesus did before in feeding these people with miraculously? But I'm here to tell you that we're guilty of this. I'm guilty of doing this too. I can't say how many times that I found myself thinking, oh my gosh, God, are we going to have enough money for rent? Are we going to have enough money for this? And just freaking out, having a panic attack. Ask Dre, ask my wife, ask my mom, ask anybody. Like, oh my gosh, where is it going to come from? And then God comes through. Or if I'm like, oh my gosh, God, this came up, what am I going to do? And God comes through. He's faithful. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves in this regard, because we can look back on times where God has done amazing things for us. But then when we find ourselves in new situations, even similar situations, the first thing we do isn't to turn to God. We turn away, we panic, and we cry. Now, understanding this verse 52, in that the disciples did not understand did not understand about the loaves. This is key. This is going to change and help us to not be so taken aback and taken off guard when we face different situations. Now, let's break this down. What did the disciples not understand about this miracle? It seems pretty straightforward, right? On a surface level, God can do amazing things, amazing creative miracles in our lives. That's easily understood. But I think what they miss and what we often miss when we read the Bible and see and hear about the amazing things that God has done is that we think that these are purely situational and circumstantial occasions. When we think about when last week I talked about Jesus healing the woman with the issue of blood, we're like, wow, that's amazing. He did that for her specifically in that specific situation. Or we may read about the miracle of the loaves. We think, wow, that's amazing of God in that specific situation. But we're missing the point of the miracles, and that God wasn't performing these things to say, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to feed 5,000 people, I've got you. But only in that specific situation, and only if you have 2 fish and 5 loaves. But if you don't have that, this does not apply to you. But the miracles in the Bible and the things that God have done are representative of his love and his willingness to provide for his children in miraculous ways. That's what they didn't understand about this. And that's why they could not believe that Jesus would be walking on the water to come and save them and catch up with them. They thought, and we often are guilty of this as well, that it was just a circumstance. Jesus only did this for this specific reason, for this specific people. It's only circumstantial. But the truth is, all the things that we've seen God did in the past, that we've seen him do now, and currently, are representative of his love and his grace towards us. God did not have to strain to produce this miracle. God didn't have to strain to walk on the water because he's God. He's the creator of reality. What he says goes. He has defined reality as we know it. Rain, water, the air we breathe, he created it all. He's Lord over it all. And he's not hindered in whatever situation that we may find ourselves in. And so when I say, don't forget that bread, what I'm saying is don't forget what God can do. Don't forget what he has done. Let's not look at the situations that we find ourselves in and simply go off based off our previous experience, our first inclination, what other people have been through. But let's rest our hopes and our expectations and our futures based on what God has done in the past. Because what he's done in the past, he can do now, and he will do again. God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. He is still willing to bless. He's still willing to heal. He's still willing to provide. That has been his heart since the beginning of creation. This world is here. God created the world for us. God created all these things for us to provide for us, to take care of us. And so don't forget that bread. Don't forget that bread. If there's anything that you repeat to yourself, don't forget that bread. I don't care if you got to write it down, put it on your fridge. Write out the things that God has done for you. Write out the ways that he's blessed you, the ways he's shown up in your life. Tattoo them on you. I don't care. We need to remember these things. Not only to say, well, if I find myself in a similar circumstance, but to realize that, geez, in the same way God moved back then, the way that God paid my rent, the way that God healed me, the way that God healed them, he can do it today. He's doing it today, and he will do it in the future. We can depend upon God.
Amen.